Welcome to Lawyer of the Week. Lawyer of the Week is creating a global community of lawyers, solicitors, and their support to inform and to encourage each other. My name is Pamela Deneuve, and I help focused and successful lawyers to move their practice to the next level and to achieve their peak performance. This week, we have a peak performer who's sharing their story. Please join us. We hope that you enjoy it.
I'll tell you, Michelle, your firm is really, as you said, leading edge. We had an opportunity to interview many, AM 100, AM 200 firms, and you certainly have set a stellar example. And I'm just so glad that we're able to put this out so that, and I'll actually share this with those firms so they can maybe see some ideas about what they can do to make for gender equity, diversity, and inclusion. So tell me more about your innovative programs within your firm.
Yeah, so I need to say that it's interesting because at Ogletree, we have combined professional development with diversity and inclusion. So my title when I first started with the firm almost 7 years ago was Director of Professional Development and Inclusion. And I since, as you stated, been promoted. So I'm Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer now. But we were very intentional and strategic about that because we recognize that many times you can't divorce the two, right? Of course, lawyers need to be great critical thinkers. They need to be great analytical people. They need to have solid legal writing skills. They need to have solid research skills, writing skills. All of those are great professional development skills that my department teaches and provides webinars and all kinds of learning and resources for our lawyers to gain those skills. But at the same time, we recognize that our world is constantly changing and we are living in a very dynamic legal environment where our lawyers need to be culturally competent. They need to have a set of professional skills that allows them to navigate different perspectives, different experiences, different backgrounds that people are coming from. And they need to make sure that they are not allowing bias to interrupt or bias to be a barrier to who they decide to give feedback to, who they decide to give a certain amount of work to, or the quality of work that they're giving to folks. We need to make sure that bias doesn't impede on the promotion process, who gets recommended for partner, who doesn't get recommended for partner. So we believe that embedding those cultural competency principles within our professional development initiatives are very important. So that's one thing I will share with you. We had two big major projects that we've done within the last 5 years. One of them is we have worked on benchmarks, and we call those OD Pro, OD Professional. And so it's kind of, Pam, it's what I didn't have when I was an associate. I didn't have anybody saying, okay, Michelle, you should be taking a deposition by the time you're a fourth year or by the time you're a fifth year. You should have a second chair to trial, if you're a litigator by the time you're a sixth year, right? I didn't have anybody saying these things to me, or nor was this outlined for me in any way. So I had to basically assume that the work that the partners were giving me was helping me to develop and grow and helping me to get to the point that, okay, well, one day Michelle will be promoted to partner. Well, as you know, millennials are very different. Millennials, they want to take ownership of their careers. They want to know, what trajectory am I on? Where am I going? Am I getting the skills that I need? Because, if I can make partner in 5 years, 6 years, I'd rather do that than 8 years, right? Yeah. So we have developed these benchmarks that outline for them, what are the developmental milestones that you need to be achieving along your way to partnership, from the first year when you come in as a new graduate out of law school, all the way up to an 8th year. So we've divided that out. So we have benchmarks for our first and second years, which we call our juniors, our third, fourth, and fifth years, which are our mid-levels, and then our sixth, seventh, and eighth years, which are our senior attorneys, right? Wonderful. And so the purpose of that is to say, okay, by this date or by this level, you should be engaging in XYZ. So it allows them to take greater ownership of their careers. Now, what we've done too, which is a little bit different than some other firms, is we have also embedded cultural competency principles within that. So we will say, as a first year, these are the kinds of diversity and inclusion experiences that you should be having. As a 7th or 8th year, these are the kinds of things that we expect you to be doing to contribute to your own growth and development, and to also contribute to the firm support of diversity in our community, in our legal profession generally as well. So we've embedded not only the substantive legal skills that we expect them to have, but we've also embedded those cultural competency and those diversity and inclusion skills that we want them to have and experiences that we want them to have. So that was one big project. And we started because 60% of our lawyers are labor and employment lawyers. We started with labor and employment competencies. We then had our managing shareholder, Matt Keene, who is a big proponent of professional development for our associates and our attorneys. I love working with him. He said, look, we need to have benchmarks for the remainder of our practice group. So we have spent time over the last 3 years developing benchmarks for the immigration attorneys, associates, for our class action attorneys and associates, for our wage and hour, our workplace safety group, and our employee benefits group. So we have 5 sets now. We will have, by the end of this year, benchmarks for our international practice group, and then we have the attorneys in Mexico and Canada who also want their separate benchmarks. So we have partnered with subject matter experts because, of course, you know, I'm not an expert in benefits or workplace safety or international law, and so we partner with shareholders who have that expertise, and they help us to develop those benchmarks from 1st to 8th year. So that has been a big, huge project, because part of that, yeah, I mean, just huge, because it really does give our associates that opportunity to take ownership. The big thing that we're doing right now is we have a new app that is going to allow us to do that electronically, because before it's just been a cumbersome kind of Word document, which is horrible, but that's really, you know, that's just kind of how we started. So this year we're uploading the labor and employment benchmarks to an app that connects to our evaluation system. So the wonderful thing is the associates will go in, they'll fill it out in this app, and then the partners, when they go to do the evaluations during the evaluation season, they will pull up the OD Pro for their associate. As they're completing their evaluation, they'll be able to see where the associate is in their benchmarks and be able to utilize that as they're doing the evaluation, which can then lead to wonderful conversations about where the associate is and where the associate wants to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that is such a comprehensive roadmap for everyone, for the senior lawyers who are doing evaluation, and for the younger lawyers who need to know where they want to go and how to get there. Right. That's bravo to your firm. I know that had to be a huge, huge undertaking.
Oh my gosh, it was, Pam. And I will tell you, it took us 2 years. I mean, I was a former labor and employment lawyer, so I developed the initial set of benchmarks, and it took me about 1.5 years, 2 years to get, as you can imagine, you've got to amalgamate or, bring together all of these different skills and experiences from 1st year to 8th year, and they're progressive, right? So you start at one level and then it becomes more difficult as you progress. Right. And so the first set, it took a long time to develop. And as you can imagine, we went through several levels of approval, right?
Yeah.
So we had to get our professional development steering committee on board. We had to get our board to look at it and approve it.
Oh my.
Went through several levels of approval, but I'm happy to say that it's been wonderful, and it's been well received. There are some offices that are just now starting to utilize it with their associates because I think they thought, we don't have to do that. But then there are other offices that are gung-ho about it, and every single associate is doing it. And so the challenge now, I think, because it was manual, it was not easy because we didn't have this app. I think now that we have the app and roll it out through that, it's going to be so much easier for everyone. And I don't think we'll have a problem with utilization, right?
Yes.
'Cause it's cumbersome when you've got a Word document and people have to save it in, in a particular place where
Sure.
somebody can find it and go and get it. And, it just is a little cumbersome. But that's one project. The other big project I wanted to chat with you real briefly about is we have another project called Success the OD Way. So OD Pro was identifying the legal substantive benchmarks, right? Success the OD Way is, okay, I'm coming into a law firm and I don't know this law firm. I don't know the culture. What if I make a faux pas? What's going to happen? What are the things that if I do X, Y, Z, I'm almost certain to shoot myself in the foot, and that is going to be a big faux pas here in this culture. So
Yes.
we wanted to identify the unwritten rules for success. We wanted to identify what were the cultural norms of this firm, like what's the firm's culture, and then we also wanted to identify what were the success factors that if you do these things, you are more likely than not to be successful here. And so we identified 5 success factors and 6 cultural norms. And I will tell you, and we created a learning guide for our associates. And how we did that was we hired somebody, a consultant, to come in and interview a number of our board members, our compensation committee members, our top rainmakers in the firm, successful shareholders. And frankly, we also identified some folks who were kind of underperformers because we wanted to balance it out and see, okay, well, what are they not doing that they probably should be doing, as well as, the top performers. And so the wonderful thing is we were able to distill all of that down into cultural norms and success factors, put it all into a learning guide for our associates. And the wonderful thing is they now have, with these 2 foundational documents, with OD Pro and with Success the OD Way, they really have this transparent roadmap, this guide, which really outlines for them, what does it take to be successful here? You've got the behaviors and the traits, and you've got the legal substantive skills. So if you cannot be successful in this environment, I think you have to take a good hard look at yourself, because we have made it as easy as we can so that you understand, our associates understand what it takes, we've codified the unwritten rules, so to speak.
Wow, I'm sure that's really helpful, and probably it's going to make an impact with your attrition and with your retention of associates, because one of the biggest complaints is no feedback, not feeling a part of something. And you all seem to have covered all those bases, and to actually give them a roadmap and on an app on top of that. That's just wonderful.
Well, we are trying, and I tell you, I think we were looking at our retention numbers the other day, and I think the standard is you want to have 90% attrition, across the board. That's a good number both for companies and law firms. I think we were looking at SHRM data, and our attrition overall is really good. And now that's not to say that we don't have some pockets where there's a little bit of a gap, because we're over 90%, and most of our demographics, right? Although we do have a little bit of a gap when you look at our some of our minority numbers. So we may be in the high 80s, we may be at 86 or 85% or 88%. We're not quite at the 90. So now we're looking to see, okay, well, why is that the case with certain groups? And then what kinds of other strategies do we need to be developing to make sure that the retention is 90% or above? Because that's what we're striving for.
Oh my gosh, that's really great.
Yeah,
that is really, really great. I just did a talk in Wyoming on retention. I'm trying to think of the figures. I can't think of them off my head, but your numbers are off the chart. So that's really wonderful. Now, Michelle, what are your biggest challenges right now? You seem to have been really looking and covering most of the areas that most firms haven't even begun to approach. So what are your challenges as you look forward?
As we look forward, I would say one thing that I'll just be real frank. I mean, we have international offices that have come on board since I've been here. Like when I started almost 7 years ago, we had an office in the Virgin Islands, and then we had 41 other offices, right? But Virgin Islands is still, part of the States, right? So we didn't have offices. Now we have offices in Paris and London and Berlin and Mexico City and Toronto. And so we're all over the place now in Europe and Latin America. And so the big challenge for me is wrapping my arms around, what does this mean? Because diversity is very different in Mexico City than it is in Paris, than it is in Berlin, that it is in London. And how they define it and then what inclusion means for them is very different. And so my team really needs to wrap our arms around this global diversity and inclusion, and what that means for Ogletree, and what kinds of strategies, specific strategies that we need to develop from a global perspective to really help our international offices be more, and I'm not saying that they're not inclusive right now, but it's just that we haven't had a lot of experience with them. And so we need to do that. And so that's the big challenge that I'm looking forward to. I have not visited those offices yet. Like I said, they've all come on board within the last couple of years. And I've been so busy getting the infrastructure built on the US side of things that I just haven't focused on the international side. So that's the next challenge.
That's wonderful. As you're thinking of it, I have a client actually that I speak to several times a week who's in Paris, and she's an Afro-American young lady. And she actually she lives in Paris, works in Paris, but the partner she reports to is in the UK and in London.
Oh, wow.
So I had an opportunity to speak to her partner that she's working to, help her to kind of, bridge the being in Paris and the culture and all that. So yeah,
absolutely. It's different.
Really big difference for
right?
Sure.
Yeah. And I'm sure with her reporting to somebody that's in the UK, I mean,
yeah. And speaking, in French in the office, learning French and all that. Now, I know, Michelle, you're married to a distinguished judge. You've got 3 beautiful daughters. You're involved in the community. You are, travel a lot with your position there with Ogletree and all of the initiatives. Name something that you do, and how do you manage your stress level?
Oh, that's a great question. I have several rituals that I do that I think really help me to manage my stress level. And I'll give you a couple of them. One of them is I've recently started meditating, and I try to meditate at least every other day. Sometimes I like to do it every day. It doesn't always happen every single day. But the meditation has just been wonderful for me because it really helps me to center myself, to really focus on being grateful and focus on those things that I'm happy about and feel blessed about, right? So that's one of the things that I do. The other thing that I do, and I have been doing this, it's going to sound, I've been doing this since my oldest turned 21 in May. I have been doing this. I've been seeing the same woman for 21 years because I remember going to her initially when I was pregnant with Sydney, my oldest.
Really?
And she's a massage therapist, and she has become a dear friend of mine, a dear friend. And I see her every 3 weeks. And
wonderful.
Without fail. And it is wonderful because as you know, being a lawyer, doing this kind of work as a chief officer, you are often, things are coming at you from all different sides. And it can be very stressful, especially with the travel and all of that, and trying to raise, 3 daughters, and my husband's a judge. So I have found that the regular massages are just a must for me, and it is not a splurge. It is something that is investing in my well-being. So I budget for it and I do it, every 3 weeks religiously. The other thing is, and this is just a small thing, I get my nails and feet done. You
Oh,
know,
wonderful.
I do regular, and I've gotten into the whole powder thing, the powder instead of the acrylic, and I love it because it lasts longer. And so I go there probably every 4 to 5 weeks. I don't have to go every 2 weeks, but it's wonderful because I can look down and my nails are done, my toes are done, and I feel great. So
That's great.
it's just the little small things like that that really make a difference in your mentality and your outlook. I also, Pam, I keep a journal, and I keep a journal on my iPad.
Oh, great.
So the wonderful thing is I'm traveling with that. And so it's an opportunity for me to reflect on. I take words of wisdom from Oprah. What are you grateful for? I try to list out once or twice a day, the 1 or 2 things a day, I should say, the things that I'm grateful for, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I do that, and I was talking to my best friend this morning, and I called her and I said, I try to acknowledge when folks have been wonderful to me in my life and have brought value. And so if I just think of somebody in the moment, I said to myself, I'm going to start calling them. I'm going to start reaching out to them because I need to let people know life is short and you never know when somebody's going to be here. And so I try to reach out to people, and I reached out to her this morning, and I hadn't talked to her for a couple of weeks. And I said, I just want to thank you for the conversation that I had with you. And I said, I don't even know if you remember this. I said, but 14 years ago, when I was freaking out because I got pregnant with my 3rd daughter, and I'm working in a law firm, and I was freaking out about, oh my God, how am I going to be able to make billable hours? How am I going to be able to do what I do? I have 2 daughters already. They're 4 and 6. Here I go getting pregnant again. And she was such a calming force. And I remember where I was when I had that conversation with her. And she said, you are going to be fine. You are going to figure this out. And this is a blessing. And I just remember, and so I told her this morning, I said, I don't know if you remember that conversation, but it made such an impact on me.
Wow.
And as I fast forward and look at my 14-year-old, I am so grateful. I am so grateful that she is here and that we have her, and she is part of the family. And I don't know what I would have done without her.
Right.
So I think just recognizing those small moments and trying to be present when you have good things that are happening, and when you can acknowledge that those good things are happening in your life, I think that it just makes you, it makes you happier, I think. So that you're not focused on the negative. You're not focused on what you don't have. You're not focused on what's not in your life.
Right. That's great. Well, I'm so glad that you shared that. I've been meditating, believe it or not, for 20 years.
Oh,
and
that's wonderful.
I could, it's like now I have to not brush my teeth. I'd have to meditate, but I'm going to try to get that massage in, because I have had massages, but I think I could really use at least once a month, at least once a month. Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful because in this particular woman, since I've been going to her for so long, she knows my body so well.
Absolutely.
And I don't even have to say anything to her. She's like, okay, what have you been doing? Because this so it's, if you can work that in, I would highly recommend it. It's truly, truly a great blessing to have.
Well, Michelle, I just want to tell you, the overall, from everything that you said, the thing that comes out to me is that you are a person who naturally creates community. I mean, you have created such community in your law firm, with diversity, and with women, and with LGBT and Q, and that everything that you've touched has been inclusive, in community. And that is such a gift to your firm, to your community, to your family. I see your posts. I mean, you just naturally create community. And this is what this world needs today, and especially what the legal profession. And so I'm just so honored to have you as our guest. I'm so happy, because when I talked to you and I said, oh, these other law firms are all stuck, I really want them to be able to see some of the things you all are doing. So I'm so thankful, and thank you so much for being our Lawyer of the Week.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really, it's an honor that you asked me to do this, and I'm just grateful to be able to share some of the things that we're doing. And I believe in creating community. I feel like this job is a natural extension of who I am and what I do,
Mhm.
and so it just feels normal to me to create that community because it's part of who I am. I think as a
Yes.
person, and so this career allows me to be to be more of who I am and who I have become both personally and professionally. So thank you for giving me a platform to be able to share that today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And to our guest, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next week. Thank you for joining Lawyer of the Week. As always, I encourage and support each one of you to achieve your own peak performance, move your law practice to the next level, and create your own legacy. I love to read your comments about how you achieve peak performance in your law practice below.